Got a minute or two? We have a way to make it not okay. Welcome to Sinister Minutes. I'm your host, writer and storyteller, Kurt Homer. Next to me is the master of macabre musical musings, the maestro of mood, Tim Parker. Together, let us take you on a journey into the dark heart of disturbing. Sinister Minutes. It's not okay. Sinister Minutes features tales that include disturbing content. That's intentional, because like the podcast itself, the creators here at Sinister Minutes are really not okay. Content featured on this podcast may include descriptions of abuse, addiction, alcohol, blood, bodily fluids, bondage, bones, bullying, burning, cancer, cannibalism, cheating, clowns, coma, confinement, control, cults, death, decapitation, depression, diets, divorce, domestic abuse, drowning, drugs, dying, eating disorders, epidemics, experimentation, family conflict, fear, fighting, fire, gaslighting, ghosts, gore, guns, harassment, hate crimes, hazing, homelessness, homicide, hospitalization, hostage situations, hostile work environments, illness, incarceration, infidelity, injury, institutionalization, kidnapping, manipulation, medical procedures, memory problems, mental health issues, military service, misogyny, murder, mutilation, needles, nightmares, nudity, pain, panic attacks, paralysis, physical abuse, pornography, physical assault, police brutality, poverty, profanity, religion, robbery, scars, screaming, self-harm, smoking, snakes, spiders, stabbing, stalking, starvation, substance abuse, suicide, terrorism, threats, torture, victim blaming, violence, war, weapons, weather, and maybe, just maybe, witches. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Sinister Minutes podcast. Thank you, as always, for listening, for telling your friends, your family, the people living under your basement stairs, and for giving us a 5-star rating on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You're the best fans we've ever had. We're getting new episodes out to you every other Friday because you lovely people continue to inspire us to greater acts of demented creativity. As always, we'd love to hear from you, so look for us on Facebook under Sinister Minutes or just reach out to us via sinisterminutes@gmail.com. Today's episode of Sinister Minutes is a special one. See, a few weeks ago, Tim and I performed a live gig as the Sinister Ministers at an annual event that he and his lovely wife Carrie have been putting on for years now, the Holland Patent MayFaire. I conjured up a brand new tale for the occasion, and Tim's amazing improv work set the mood as I spoke in a story he'd never heard before. Anyway, we had our recording gear with us, and as a result, we're happy to bring a piece of this experience to you, our podcast fans who either couldn't make it to MayFaire or maybe couldn't bear to be so close to so much greatness. The Tyburn jig is an absolutely punishing dance move that really twisted a lot of people over the few hundred years that it was popular. It isn't quite so hot as it was during its heyday, but then our friends in the UK have moved on to other forms of entertainment. Rest assured, your favorite Sinister ministers are sticking to the forms of entertainment they have always enjoyed. Ones which are certainly not okay. Tyburn Jig, written and narrated by Kurt Homan. A deal's a deal, and a witch is as good as her word. Words spoken to me by the only witch with whom I have ever made a deal. Words that haunt my every waking moment. My name is Jonathan Wild, or that was the name my mother gave me when I was born. It's been a bloody long time since anybody's called me that. There was a time when hearing my name made people think of the Thief-Taker General, a role I created for myself and held for many years here in London. My fame was in the finding of stolen goods and in bringing those who stole them to justice. Many a man and more than a few women swung from the end of a rope on the Tyburn tree because of my testimony about their misdeeds. You've not heard of the Tyburn tree? Why, it's the very thing that put the village on the map. Tyburn has all the usual things: a church and a pub, a lodging house and a mill, a blacksmith and a carpenter. But the tree, not a real one, though it's at least made of wood. 3 great posts driven into the ground, supporting 3 great beams in a triangle shape. Each of those beams long enough to hold 8 nooses. Because hanging, you see, is the whole purpose. And watching a hanging at the Tyburn tree, high entertainment, an event for the whole family to enjoy. Nobody, before or after my time as Thief-Taker General, had anywhere near my level of success. When my career came to an end, I recorded all the thieving souls I'd sent to the devil, and there were 60 names on the list. I'm damned good at finding miscreants, mostly because I started my life as one. I know how it all worked. The best ways to break into a house, what had value and what didn't, where to sell the items that were stolen. In my prime, my associates and I successfully returned stolen goods to their rightful owners, often before they even realized they'd been robbed. If they offered the Thief-Taker General a generous reward for getting their valuables back to them, that just allowed me to continue my good work. I dealt in artwork, silver, collectibles, and many times documents that held value simply because of the information they contained. All of these were returned with a smile. The thieves I captured, more often than not, were known to me. Some of them had started by working with me and later turned against me. Others were members of unsavory gangs that roamed the streets of London in search of easy marks. I and my associates always managed to bring them to justice, and justice, in the time of the thief-taker general, could only mean dancing the Tyburn jig. Do you know how that dance got its name? You see, in some places, a hanging means placing a noose around a man's neck and then dropping him a goodly distance. He reaches the end of the rope, the noose does its job, and pop! His neck breaks, and he's dead. The Tyburn tree isn't high enough for that. The drop is short. Instead of a broken neck, a man strangles as he dangles, feet kicking about in one last dance. A dance called the Tyburn jig. A dance, some might say, that takes a lifetime to perfect. Or so I thought. Anyway, things went smoothly for a good many years, and your kindly thief-taker general ran a lucrative business in returning stolen goods to their rightful owners. Then came a change in politics, and a number of disgruntled former associates decided to take the law into their own hands. They accused me, Jonathan Wilde, thief-taker general, of leading not a law-abiding business, but a gang of thieves. The accusations? Atrocious! It was suggested that I was orchestrating the theft of other people's personal goods, that I was taking stolen goods and offering them back to their owners, that I was making a living collecting rewards on goods that I myself had stolen, that I was setting up other miscreants to dance the Tyburn jig in my stead. It is true, of course, that I ratted out numerous members and sometimes even leaders of thieving gangs that I uncovered in and around this fine city. And when I found them with stolen goods in hand, of course I swore to that in court, but now the friends and families of those thieves banded together to level these accusations against me. What's worse, some of those once upstanding citizens to whom I graciously returned the stolen items I had found also joined in. And with their testimony against me, I was arrested and dragged off to Newgate Prison. It was not so bad at first. Having greased the palms of my jailers with several shillings, I continued to eat and drink well, and even ran my business operations from my cell. Yet I feared my time was short, for once at Newgate, the only likely path for release is the long 3-mile road to the Tyburn tree. Never let it be said that I was not a man without resources. With my very neck on the line, I called upon one, the witch called Margaret. Like the other vile creatures engaged in her abominable trade, sold charms and potions to people starved for love or wanting to do away with a rival. Unlike the charlatans who set up and tore down their divination tents as fast as a sparrow's flight, Margaret had a regular clientele and a steady location. She paid the constables to stay away from her business. Most importantly, it had been confirmed that she was a genuine witch. I'd known of her, as I knew of every illegal operation happening in my part of London, but I'd never needed her services, not until my arrest. The witch was not as I expected. Not some ancient crone dressed in black and cackling madly. Instead, the auburn-haired woman standing outside my cell appeared slightly younger than my own 42, dressed smartly like any other woman of above modest means. She told me what I wanted to hear, that my soul might be swapped with that of another. But she cautioned me that the spell would take effect only at that instant when death became the only possible future. When I asked her to clarify, she warned that it would be me who would bear all the pain of hanging. The soul of the man with whom I made the exchange would take my place in the realm of death only at the last moment. My mind would enter his body then, such that even as my old body was being carried to the grave, my consciousness would live on. Too good to be true? If only I'd known half of it. Her price was steep. She claimed a need for supplies and bargains to be struck with unsavory characters, but 50 guineas, more than I paid my cook for a year of service. And she reminded me, no cook would ever see to it that I lived to tell the tale of dancing the Tyburn jig. Still, I'm a man accustomed to bargaining, and even with my very life on the line, I thought myself the clever businessman when I bartered her down to 31 guineas, 15 shillings. I realized much later that the wily witch had got me to agree to exactly 666 shillings. To seal the deal, she spit on her right palm as a man would and extended it through the bars to me, saying, "A deal's a deal, which is as good as her word." Shocked by her vulgar action, nonetheless spit on my own palm, and in that handshake I sealed my fate. I wrote her a check and told her who would honor it. She would be paid, part up front, the rest upon completion. It is small recompense, but I never paid her again after that first day. In a blur of smoke and a scent of lilac blossoms, she was gone from that dank corridor. Well, days turned to weeks in my cramped cell, and soon the month of May was upon the land, and the name of Jonathan Wild came up for trial. The courtroom was packed, and person after person came forward to claim I'd stolen from them, or lied to them, or that they'd otherwise been wronged by my long career as thief-taker general. My responses to each outlandish claim were met with jeers and derision. Applause broke out when I was found guilty, and the courtroom erupted in cheering when I was sentenced to be hanged from the Tyburn tree a week hence. I noted the faces and names of those who spoke against me, those who cheered for my demise. That I'd have my revenge upon them all, I was certain. I saw the witch leave the courtroom as I was dragged away, not cheering like the others, but quietly nodding as she leveled her gaze. I did not see her again until the night before my ride to Tyburn. When I told her I thought she'd skip town with my money, she again said, "A deal's a deal, and a witch is as good as her word." On the morrow, she assured me that my neck would feel the point of the helm, and my soul would depart my body, but neither God nor devil would be taking it. I asked whose body I would inhabit the following day, and she replied that she could not say. It might be the clergyman, it might be the hangman. She knew only that it would be someone close by, as the magic could not travel far. I was happy to hear this, thinking of the faces of those who laughed at my death, and how I would reveal my truth to them as I sent them to dance their own jigs. The ride to Tyburn was worse than I expected. The cart crawled through the streets, the horses showing no strain at all, and 3 miles took nearly as many hours to complete. All along the way, the streets were filled with people laughing, people jeering, people throwing rotten fruit, and ran out of that handfuls of mud. And there it was, the Tyburn tree, 3 stout poles, 3 great beams forming the great triangle overhead. The cart stopped beneath the nearest of the beams, and the hangman stepped forward. I recognized his voice through the hood he wore, and cursed him by name even as he made me stand up in the cart, draped the noose around my neck, and tied my hands behind my back, cinching the leather tight. I recalled the witch's words and smirked at his confusion. Should it be him who took my place amongst the dead? I barely acknowledged the exuberant crowd, but noted the familiar faces surrounding me, those who seemed not at all upset to see me executed. I swore I would remember all once I occupied my new body. Sometimes, when they drove the cart from under the feet of the condemned, he might drop quickly. Today was not such a day. The horses plodded along as slowly as they'd arrived, and I took small steps upon the cart as it slipped away. My toes clung to the edge for a moment, then I dangled, helpless, at the end of that damnable, ever-tightening rope. I drew in a couple of quick breaths before that became impossible, and then the pressure on my throat and neck became intolerable. The rough fibers of hemp sliced and burned into my neck, and with the only muscles I could still control, I kicked my feet in the throes of the Tyburn jig. After what seemed hours of agony, blackness at last settled around me as the crowd cheered for my demise, and then I snapped up. Still shrouded in darkness, breath filled my nose, my throat, my lungs. The witch had done it. I reached my throat, my now freed hands. The rope was gone. In its place was a beard. But no man in 1725 wore a beard. Had I taken the form of a madman? Bigger? I rose to my feet, a different body unfolding beneath me, slight aches that felt at once unfamiliar and yet somehow normal. In the darkness, I walked 5 paces before coming to a stone wall. Turning, I walked a few more paces before coming to another. When I found the steel door, my worst fears were realized. I heard her then. That familiar voice, the witch, Margaret, the words she spoke, the ones which have haunted me since. A deal's a deal, and a witch is as good as her word. She had traded my soul with that of another. But the other? Another man in prison, condemned to die. In my time, I sent over 60 souls to die on the Tyburn tree. I learned that day that one of them had been her sister. And while I knew all of their names, I still do not know which of them she was. But for the sake of that sister, Margaret had vowed to make me pay. She traded my soul after making me suffer the bite of the noose, making me dance the Tyburn jig, and for each of the 60 souls I had delivered to that fate, she would trade my soul again. 60 rides I would take to Tyburn. 60 times I would bear the agony of the noose. 60 dances of the Tyburn jig. she told me that when it was time for the 61st, she might at last tire of me and allow my soul to depart this earth. That is, unless the devil wished to continue the game. I cannot recall how many times I have made the journey from Newgate to Tyburn. No means exists for me to leave a mark in a book, upon a wall, or even etched into flesh. Sometimes weeks or months pass between my hangings, other times only days. For each journey is made in a new form, each neck new to the feeling of the coarse hemp rope that I know only too well. I can only pray each time that this one is the last.
I think.
Sinister Minutes is presented by Kurt Homan and Tim Parker. The musical score was composed and performed by Tim Parker. Our production team consists of Kurt Homan and Tim Parker. On behalf of everyone here at the Sinister Minutes podcast, namely Kurt Homan and Tim Parker, we thank you for listening, for joining us as we explore all the ways in which we are not okay. This audio program is copyright 2024 by Kurt Homan and Tim Parker under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.